And there's comments that are just extraordinary. I'm going to go right to the top. WEI says, our customers' demand, customer, that's single, the apostrophe S, demand for far exceeds our ability to supply. There it is. NVIDIA. So you have NVIDIA, which is going to be the world's largest company soon, blowing out the numbers. Obviously, they're all agreeing that AI is incredibly strong. The rest is not that strong. And David, what I can tell you...
Wow, not enough to even increase capacity twofold, it said.
They can't. Yeah. What I can tell you is, given the fact that NVIDIA has become the bellwether, you're not going to be able to beat the verification away from Jensen, unless you look at Taiwan Semi. So I just think that, you can get up, you can see the stuff at 2:30 or 3:30, they report a call, and then look at the reaction. So when you have the semis going after yesterday's shortfall because of ASML,
yes,
and then I'm going to add Blackstone.
Okay.
Finance,
yeah,
tech,
yeah.
Those are the leaders of this rally.
And we'll forget industrials, all-time high on a cap and equal weight.
I mean, we haven't even heard from them yet. They're going up. But so far this amazing earnings season, if I have tech and I have banks, what do I need?
Back to ASML, back to TSMC, because that's certainly the driving force in the market. I mean, Jim, obviously you hit it right on there.
Thank you.
AMD, NVIDIA were down a couple of days ago in part because of this ASML warning. Even when they said it wasn't AI related, a lot of people didn't believe them.
Exactly right.
Because the guide down was so big, they're like,
5
we
to
don't
3.
know what's going on there at ASML. And then it's followed by this huge number from TSMC, as you pointed out. And, the chips are more expensive, so the average selling price goes up for TSMC because the margin, even if it's fixed at the same percentage, it's just a bigger number.
Right. Oh, so right. And I did love the fact that what they basically did, they actually reiterated what Jensen said, which is there's insane demand. And you'll see AMD club name we bought. Now they work at Taiwan Semi. Marvell Tech, where the CEO bought $1 million worth of stock, Carl, just last week. That is Taiwan Semi. So you have this weird. We never used to think that we'd had to get up in the middle of the night for Taiwan Semi. We get up for Nestle's, which reported a terrible number.
Yeah, we'll talk Nestle.
But you come back and you say, well, look, AI is real. And that's really the theme of Taiwan Semi. Because there's this moment right now where we're thinking, serial companies are AI. No, but this was a verification of the big rally.
But the other thing Druckenmiller said, of course, was lamenting selling NVIDIA.
That is
a, quote, big mistake.
I have to tell you, one of the reasons you have to like Stanley is whoever admits that they sold something. Whoever says, look at my woods. And the answer is, and remember, Ken Langone would tell you, investor with him that's never had a lost year, has a level of humility that I love. Kind of like Tepper, but less profane.
He's not alone in being sad that he sold NVIDIA. I mean, anybody who sold NVIDIA is sad they did so. I'm sure Masa in particular at SoftBank. How much percent did they own of NVIDIA back 6 years ago, 6 years ago?
Yeah. Well, remember Jensen
made some money, but
Jensen
sold it before the big move.
Jensen has it. There are so many millionaires at NVIDIA.
Yeah,
it's incredible. I mean, you go in and everybody, so many, and the humility there. You don't think anybody's any different from working at Bethlehem Steel. It's incredible, the culture that they have. By the way, NVIDIA is not up as much as I thought.
It would be.
Taiwan Semi.
And that just brings me to somebody like Stanley Druckenmiller, one of the greatest of all time, says he's, quote, licking his wounds, licking my wounds from selling NVIDIA too soon. So, yeah, one of the greatest, and, with enough humility to do an interview and say, it was a big mistake. I've made many mistakes in my investment career. One of them, I sold all of my NVIDIA probably somewhere between 800 and 950. I own none, and I owned none the last 400 points. It just speaks to the idea of the market kept going up. We kept looking at these risks. Some saw these risks as perhaps at least tactically insurmountable and got out of some positions, and now wish they didn't. A guide, it's up 12%. NVIDIA's up, Broadcom's up. NVIDIA's at a new high, by the way, as well, and it's right on the heels of Apple in terms of market cap. But this has been an important trade. It's looked a little rocky, if not lumpy, at certain points, and thank you, Taiwan Semi.
Well, you have to give it to these guys. I mean, honestly, they build capacity and the buyers come. I mean, people will pay anything to get these chips now. So let's just all admit that whether or not companies are able to make any money from AI based on, applying them, if you're Google or Amazon or Apple, they have to buy the chips. So it's not about what they're doing with the chips that is monetizing them. It's whether they have to take what supply is available. And we're seeing that across the board. So expect that the NVIDIA number is going to be extremely good because we're getting that information from Taiwan Semi.
You want to talk about NVIDIA? Here, as we say, new all-time high, right on the heels of Apple in terms of overall market cap leadership in the market.
Look, this is just one of those situations where until they materially stumble, fundamentally, like miss a delivery or have some sort of like a manufacturing issue, like until something like that happens, people just come into this name. And I don't even know if do we all remember on this desk, literally, this stock was in a 24% drawdown in September. Mm-hmm. You know how many people said if NVIDIA ever has a correction, I'll buy it? Did they? Did they buy it
when it was $100?
Yeah,
right.
Or did they say, "Oh, it's in a 24% correction, it's over"? A lot of people that said, "Oh, I can't wait for it to come in. That's where I'll buy." Well, it did come in, didn't last long, and yet again, you have outrageous options activity in the stock. It's at all-time highs. It's so rare that you see the second largest publicly traded company in the world have the level of options activity, bullish call spreads this time, that you have right now. And this has just been like a recurring nightmare for people that are trying to manage a portfolio that's benchmarked to the S&P. This is like high beta, gigantic weighting. How do you fight this? There's almost no other stock that acts like it. And listen, I submit, this is a really tough name at today's valuation. You could love the business, but if you have no position and you're watching this thing take out 140 as I'm talking, it's like, oh my God, how am I not in this stock? And I talk to these people and I know.
Yeah, and look, I mean, people who have not been in have gotten in what they thought was late, and it hasn't turned out necessarily to be late.
Do you weigh? I mean, the NVIDIA debate is so interesting because just as it seemed as though the whales were exiting at the right point, you have Stanley Druckenmiller coming and saying, maybe I regret that, and I'd look for an entry point to get back in.
Yeah, and NVIDIA is super tough. I mean, luckily we own a lot of it here, but we've been trimming it along the way, and obviously, every time it hits a new high, you say, well, man, trimmed it too early, obviously, but it is hard to, I don't want to be too greedy when it comes to it.
Fair enough.
Taiwan Semi is going to be the last battle fought with NVIDIA on this. I just think that as we go into 2025, expectations are really very high given what NVIDIA and Taiwan Semi are saying. But if you look at the price action, if you look at the forward estimates for the hyperscalers that I just mentioned, they're not accelerating in a meaningful fashion. So it's really going to come down to what they say as far as spending, in my opinion, over the next month or so.
The comments from TSM were pretty convincing. They're going to double capacity by the end of the year of their advanced chip packaging technology capacity, which is needed for NVIDIA's highest, most advanced AI chips. That seems to indicate that there is the demand there.
That there is the demand that goes much broader than just the hyperscalers, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
So, though this clearly was good and expectations were really high already going in. So that's pretty impressive. Of course, it bodes well for NVIDIA. I wonder, though, if it's going to run up into what are just ratcheting up the expectations prior to. So it's up on this good news as it should be, but I don't know, we'll see it by the time it gets to their earnings.
Taiwan is dependent on NVIDIA and AMD to the tune of about 15% collectively between the two names as far as revenue. When you look at the stock, to Dan's point, there's ASML, so there's your non-AI chips and AI chips. You're going to have a backlog of AI chips. That's where the growth is. That's where Taiwan's sweet spot is. And that's where NVIDIA's sweet spot is, and to a lesser extent, AMD. When the market starts to fail, NVIDIA, Taiwan Semi, AMD will be the first ones to fail. So this depends on the market continuing its ascent.
So where do you stand?
I would be a seller of these. I would be locking in profit on all of these because
you're out of NVIDIA.
So I'm out of NVIDIA, but obviously the last chip to fall is going to be, there's such a backlog with artificial intelligence chips that you're going to have that demand ongoing, but they still, 2/3 of all stocks trade with the overall market. So unless you believe this market is going to go to the moon,
which you don't,
which I don't, because you need a little healthy pullback. I'm not saying there's going to be a 20% decline, but there's going to be a short and sweet pullback, and I'd wait for those as your entrance.
Guy, what do you say?
It's interesting, we talked about, what's today, Thursday. So Tuesday, ASML, we had a conversation on the desk, and we actually pointed out that, the decline that they were seeing was in the non-AI portion of their business. So it really wasn't an indictment yet of AI, but if you start to look out in the future, potentially could be one of those first dominoes to fall. Taiwan Semi, we've said it 100 times, it's one of the 5 most important companies in the world, just crossed the $1 trillion market cap, and justifiably so. And we got through those prior double tops of 185. But I look at today and say, you know what? Given what Taiwan Semi said, NVIDIA should have traded a lot better. Now, I'll say this. The move in NVIDIA since the August 5th low has been staggering. But the fact that we didn't close above that June 20th high of 140 and change, at least today, I think it's a little concerning.
Oh, so again, that outside reversal day. We go back to that day.
Still intact.
Still
intact, Melissa Lee.
No, I understand. And I remember having that conversation right here on the desk, and it's amazing how intact it has been. But Karen, you don't trade on technicals. You look. So Steve has made the call that he's willing to give up whatever upside there is. And I think this is the dilemma that most people have with NVIDIA, right? You see the stock continuing to go to record highs. You're like, I don't want to pull the trigger. I don't want to sell. I don't want to sell because I'm worried I'm going to miss the next however many
whatever
points,
it is,
10 points to 50, whatever it is.
So what do I do?
How do you do? How do you weigh that?
I look to sell out of the money calls. So you take in some premium, and obviously if there's a big way down, then the premium doesn't do you enough good. But anything sort of flat to up a little, that's good. And you can continue to, you don't have to realize any gains. That's important. And if you are short term, if you sell calls out at least 30 days, you can keep aging your position to get to long term. So for me, a lot of it is tax driven.
Right.
I kind of want to stay in it anyway and see what, how does this all?
Sure.
Right. But at some point, you have to start selling some, and then if it goes through your strike price, then you're going to, if you just let yourself be assigned, you'll have a smaller position.
Right. You don't trade in options, and so you would.
I don't, but that would be what you should do to protect your position. I go off of levels. So when you say I'll give up the upside, I give up the upside to a certain extent. And then once it proves itself, I use that old high as my exit strategy. If I'm wrong again, if I pick the top and it continues to climb, I use that old high as my support level. So if it breaks down through there, I sell the position. If not, I keep accruing it.
Dan, if what you predict comes to fruition, NVIDIA could be one of the greatest shorts out there. When does that day come in your view? What do you look for?
Well, let's step back to ASML, okay? So if you have a bookings number that was down 55%, okay, from just quarter over quarter, if you think about that, and they're just saying it's XAI, it just can't be. You can't have that lack of visibility. It just doesn't, so something doesn't square with me on that, okay? So at some point, maybe it'll be this next quarter where NVIDIA talks about insane demand, but like the lead times for those chips are going to be pushed out, so you see a slight deceleration. I don't know. I just think that, again, the CapEx for these biggest customers, 40% of NVIDIA's sales come from Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta. And at some point, I just think they're going to see a deceleration in their orders, and I think there's some error that's going to come out of it. And just think about from the highs in July to the lows just recently, a month or so ago. I mean, NVIDIA sold off 35%, so it's not going to take much. And that was just a market sell-off. That was a sentiment thing. That was a vibe thing. At some point, there'll be a fundamental reason for these stocks to correct, and it can get cut in half. I'm just like, that's just obvious. If it could sell off on a market sell-off 35%, if there's a fundamental reason, it's going to get worse.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished nearly flat today, and NVIDIA finished the day up by nearly 0.9%. This is after Taiwan Semiconductor reported great third quarter results very early this morning. This is so important for NVIDIA because while NVIDIA designs chips, TSMC is the company that actually manufactures NVIDIA's chips. In yesterday's video, I told you that I had gone through TSMC's monthly revenue reports, and based on what I was seeing, I estimated that TSMC's third quarter revenue would be somewhere around $23.59 billion US dollars, which would be a roughly 11.3% quarter-over-quarter increase. And today, TSMC reported net revenue of roughly $23.5 billion USD. These results are really good, and I want to point out something very important. This report shows signs of revenue acceleration. This is a big deal because it means we may see revenue acceleration in NVIDIA as well. After NVIDIA reported earnings back on August 28th, you may remember that the stock responded poorly even though the results were good. This was because NVIDIA's growth rate appeared to be decelerating. And something that I said repeatedly following that earnings report was that even though NVIDIA's revenue growth rate decelerated during that quarter, it was all because of the delay in Blackwell. And I said repeatedly that once Blackwell begins shipping in volume, I thought we could see NVIDIA's growth rate reaccelerate. Well, this earnings report from TSMC seems to be in agreement with that idea, because this earnings report from TSMC shows signs of revenue growth acceleration. And we're seeing TSMC's revenue growth accelerate right when Blackwell is starting to ship out to customers. You see where I'm going with this? This may be what is leading to the growth rate acceleration. And this is why I'm very excited about NVIDIA over the next few quarters. If TSMC is seeing revenue growth acceleration because Blackwell is starting to ship out to customers, then that means NVIDIA is likely to experience accelerating revenue growth as well. At NVIDIA's last earnings call, we were told that Blackwell would start shipping in Q4, and NVIDIA was expecting about $3 to $4 billion of Blackwell revenue in the first quarter that it ships. And here we are still in NVIDIA's fiscal third quarter, and we already have confirmation that Blackwell is shipping to customers. This means that NVIDIA is further along in their production ramp of Blackwell than what they guided for at their last earnings conference call. This is a very big deal. This means two things. First, we should see some actual Blackwell revenue show up in NVIDIA's next earnings report. And secondly, if NVIDIA is further along in the production ramp of Blackwell, then that means they are likely to increase their Q4 guidance for Blackwell revenue. They last guided for $3 to $4 billion in Blackwell revenue in Q4. But since Blackwell has already started shipping ahead of schedule, I think NVIDIA is likely to guide that number higher at their next earnings report. Again, this is a very big deal. Now, in the immediate short term, as I've said in many videos recently, I'm hesitant about adding to positions in this market right now because of the pattern the market followed back in 2016 and 2020. During both of those years, the market traded lower about a week or two before the election and reached a relative low on the Friday before the election. This year, that would be November 1st. So I am hesitant about adding to positions right now until November 1st. Here's the thing though, if we get a dip between now and November 1st, then I think that will likely be a great buying opportunity. Because back in 2016 and 2020, the market began trading higher during the actual week of the election and rallied into year end. So I'm cautious in the immediate short term. And if we get a dip between now and November 1st, I would likely be a buyer. Looking ahead with a long-term perspective, I am bullish on the future of NVIDIA, and I genuinely would not be surprised if this company doubles over the next 2 years, given NVIDIA's current growth trajectory and upcoming product cycles. This year, we get the launch of Blackwell, then Blackwell Ultra in 2025, and later on we get Rubin in 2026. NVIDIA has a very clear runway of growth ahead of it for the next 2 years. As long as things remain peaceful in the Pacific, and as long as none of the hyperscalers significantly reduce their capex spending on AI, then I think NVIDIA should be just fine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. I think NVIDIA's brightest days are ahead. At least that's how I see it. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you all so much for watching these videos. It really does mean a lot to me. And with that, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.